Welcome back, dear viewers, to our series Natural Medicine. Today, we have the topic of TCM again, traditional Chinese medicine, especially the active ingredients, the pharmaceutically effective teas, which we'd like to discuss again today with Professor Hans Rausch, who is also the most recognized TCM expert. He's the one who's not just a chemist and a biologist, he's also the one responsible for setting the gold standards for over 3,000 active ingredients, so they can be used in pharmacy in this composition. He's the Deputy Ombudsman at the DIN Institute in Germany, but also a recognized expert in pharmaceutical law. And he's back with us today, so it's a great honor for me to welcome him. Dear Hans, it's good to have you here. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and hopefully we have nice topics again that we can discuss. Yeah, everything that you say is somehow always very exciting for me and interesting, because if a biologist and a chemist analyzes the things in life, then that's just exciting for me. Actually, you should have been explaining this a lot more in school for small children. You know this subject, chemistry and biology, is so exciting, but it's conveyed to us in such a dry and boring way. And it's actually a miracle when you also consider alchemy. You have a substance and put a few neutrons, protons, and God knows what in there, and suddenly you have a new substance. It's fascinating, isn't it? Well, although you have to say that I am not the classic just biologist or just chemist. I have to explain, of course, that I originally also studied high school teaching, so that also means I acquired the appropriate pedagogy and didactics. And I've also learned the tools with which you can work through complex relationships in a digestible form for the corresponding target group. Today, I actually want to talk about these multi-effect teas again, where we already talked a few times about the fact that TCM is not always TCM. There really are a number of products littering the market today that just aren't what they actually should be. And in this regard, the government in China, in cooperation with Japan and other countries, has started to introduce a DIN standard, also in cooperation with you, a series of DIN standards. So it's a whole series, so that one can receive these long-standing therapies from these active ingredients, and that the reputation, which was suffering recently, is going back up again. But already today we have these special teas that already represent the highest level, even if the DIN stamp is still missing. I'd like to talk to you about these teas that really have the effect that has been documented for a very long time. And one in particular, I have it upstairs. You brought it for me once too. And that is a tea. It actually only says CCP01, I think, without previous illness. So, just a tea that says no previous illnesses, and I actually consume a glass of this tea every day. And I always offer it to my guests too. It tastes incredibly delicious, no sugar added, nothing added. It's just plain good. Now, you've told me there are 9 plants in this tea. Can you explain or tell me something about what this tea is doing in my body? Yeah, well, of course, we have to go back to the... I'll start differently. We have active mixtures. So these teas do not consist of one plant, but of a combination of plants, which complement each other accordingly in their overall effect. They're also very, very time-consuming and very complicated connections for the layperson. What fits together, what doesn't? How do you have to interpret something in the sense of traditional Chinese medicine, but also the other medical directions derived from it? So, through the appropriate empirical medicine, and I really insist on such terms, empirical medicine, which has been handed down over centuries, are the corresponding mixtures, where also the mixing ratio was precisely defined. with the variation that the doctor, of course, can make certain changes for the individual patient, because we have a completely different medicine than we see it as Western medicine today. Today's Western medicine, I now add a bit of a bland aftertaste, is based on a 25-year-old male test subject, and everything that works for him should then be used by and work for the entire population, from an adolescent, so via the children stage to old people at the end of life. That means the reference is not the person who gets it, but the reference is a 25-year-old male. Standard patient. In the meantime, we found that many women, because of their other hormonal composition in their body, react partly worse, massively worse, to such drugs because they've never been optimized for this target group. Asian medicine, in its original form, has primarily the definition: I have a basic recipe, same as in Western medicine, standard, and the doctor basically has the responsibility to adapt or partly improve this recipe according to the overall constitution of the patient, possible previous illnesses, secondary illnesses, to use them individually for this patient. So we have Asian medicine in its traditional application. It's an individualized medicine. Western medicine is a standardized medicine. Now, of course, we have the problem, if the whole thing is handled without medical intervention, of course you have to go back to standard average recipe measure, that which is also recorded in the traditional way. This is the standard mixture that works for most of the people and then has to be modified individually to improve it for the individual. So, this mix of 9 has traditionally had a long wealth of experience and is also still partially optimized. Of course, you have to add one thing. That is now an interpretation that is not popular in China, but which, I have to say clearly, a lot, not just a lot of porcelain, was destroyed by the Cultural Revolution, and many old beards have been cut off. But the tradition of TCM has been abruptly interrupted. So TCM survived in China because traditional Chinese doctors went into exile and only returned to China after the Mao era. In the entire time frame, traditional Chinese medicine was not passed on properly. That means we have a huge leak in between. But doctors in the USA and doctors in Europe, who fled as TCM doctors and carried on this knowledge to then implement it again into the Chinese medicine, this resulted that this Western approach, we also need to understand why it works, has also been taken over into TCM. And with the help of modern research, the effects and have now been described as well. That means that in our tradition, we have, of course, the knowledge based on experience over centuries, millennia, that the stuff works. It didn't have to be understood. The basic concepts were fulfilled. It worked. It was known that it was good in this composition. And through this new input from the West came the Western way of thinking. We have to prove why it works into the traditional Asian medicine. So gigantic efforts are being made in Asia today to really prove the mechanisms of action of these drugs. and substantiate them. We heard before that I'm a biologist and I'm a chemist. The chemist thinks in terms of structures, the biologist in complex contexts. That means I'm trying to interlink these two thought models to say, yes, we know what we're doing, but we can even say why we're doing it. That's actually this modernization character, as it's also massively promoted by the governments there, in order to simply create a solid basis for the future to build on the rich tradition. That means I use something that is already good and prove it scientifically. This means that these 9 herbal substances in their composition have very clear indications, which are now described. The indications were always described. It's then proven by studies which active component, so in the multitude of material compounds, you can just fish out a few characteristic main features. We've heard on other episodes that each plant has 1 to 2 million components. I just wanted, that was the next question. So we've maybe 10 to 20 million components in here. Not necessarily 20 million, but we have components in the millions. And they've all an active ingredient in them which can trigger something. Let's put it this way, the complex mechanisms of action of a combination of different chemicals. Basically, every single substance is a chemical in the true sense of the word. How they interact and are ultimately responsible for the overall effect can't be estimated at the moment. From Western phytomedicine, we know many effects of the so-called synergism research. By saying that we leave certain components out, then we see what happens when the component is not in. And then we compare it to when it was inside. And we make the counter attempt. We leave out another and only take the individual substance. And the combination of these two is not the overall effect. So effect A plus effect B is not what we see in the combination. But in many cases, the effect in the combination is a multiple of what would come out additively. My question, now we have this balance T with these 9 substances which have 10, 15 million active substances in them, is actually unbelievable. It makes you humble. If I buy another tea now that doesn't have these high standards, if I compare it to another tea pharmacologically, you still had another word for the production, I just forget it now. Does it have as many active ingredients, or is it only a small part? It can have as many active ingredients. Of course, there is no guarantee that... so we always have to consider... I'll give you another example. Oh, I wanted to say compactate. Yes, of course, I'll just give an example now to make it clear. If we've already talked about valerian. If we use the right valerian, it will have an effect. If you use a different type of valerian, it suddenly doesn't work, because this other type doesn't contain certain ingredients. So in this example, it lowers the reputation of valerian because it doesn't work. On the other hand, if I have the right valerian, I get the effect. Exactly. Therefore, when it comes to such things, you have to buy the pharmaceutical product where the active ingredient, the effect, is proven and described. Is that correct? It is correct. It's the simplified statement. In the product sold pharmaceutically, you can certainly find the right ingredient. With the other, it can be, but it doesn't have to. Because from a commercial interest, nobody cares what you use. And we've had the same problem in Southeast Asian medicine for years, that so-called analog plants that look similar, are simply put in. Nobody sees it in the mix anyway. It gives more volume. You can also thin down with grass. It costs even less. We've already seen that many times. We really have seen a lot of things in this regard. So much abuse in that direction. And that's one of the reasons why they are now trying to eliminate or minimize this image of wrong ingredients, wrong composition, also incorrect in composition in terms of quantity, with quality campaigns. We'll never eliminate it fully, because there will always be, let's say, price incentives, because it's cheap. Things will appear on the market that don't belong there. You just have to say this in all fairness. But the quality campaigns are supposed to ensure that the users really get what they need. I just talked about the right composition beforehand, and I can only say one thing. We had a gentleman known as Paracelsus in the Middle Ages. He said, it's the dose that counts. And if it's dosed incorrectly, it can also be a poison. Because overdose or wrong dosage or wrong combinations can cause damage, but doesn't have to. That's why maintaining these formulas, which have proven themselves over hundreds of years, is so important, that you take it exactly as it's described, that you take it that way, and now also provide evidence on the scientific level why it works. So, life from tradition, with the implementation of modern knowledge, and then I actually get into the compactate. That's then secured there, according to the best of international knowledge, also confirmed with the experts, and I am on the panel of experts for this international standardization. The compactate is at the moment the only product where the quality absolutely reflects what a traditional user, so a pharmacist in China, who individually knows the, let's say, manufacturing places of the individual plants, and only fishes out the best and puts them together optimally for their patients. If you can simulate that in an industrial way, that's what is absolutely reflected in this compactate. The whole thing has a very important function. But I have one more question now. If it's all having an effect, why didn't it become a drug then? There are many of the standard recipes which are a drug in China. However, in Europe they may only be sold as a drug if they have a corresponding official approval, so are licensed, or have a registration. Why is this tea now, this compactate, with these 8 active ingredients, or 9, actually approved for sale? Because it does have an effect. I once learned that everything that has an effect is a drug. No, I can't leave it like this. Medicines or drugs have a corresponding legal structure, and only those who fulfill the formalisms of the legal structure are allowed to be called drugs. We just heard now it doesn't have a real name, just a coding number. That's one of the reasons why. For a very simple reason. According to the European understanding of pharmaceutical law, I said that either authorization or registration is required. That, of course, costs a lot of money and time. That means the patient knows there is something, but I can't get it. Not necessarily what should be in all of our interests either. In order to still give the patient the opportunity, there is the possibility in European and also in Swiss law that the pharmacist can mix standard recipes according to known formulations, which are also traditionally recorded, in the relevant specialist books, which then typically need to be boiled out of the plant by the patient. That means I have to go to the pharmacist and say, I want this mix of 9 according to traditional Chinese medicine. Then they mix it up for me, write down my name, and then I have it. Yeah. Then you typically have the plant material and go home, and then have to boil it for an hour or so. And then have a tea that may not taste that good, which makes the kitchen impassable for half a day because it smells strange and so on. And now the problem actually begins. To generate an industrial product that reflects exactly that, what the domestic boiling produces, you need a standard, and a really solid standard, of a therapeutic drug extract ratio. So, if I have 5 grams of a plant material in a certain combination, when boiling it at home, it results in, for example, a dry equivalent of a third of a gram out, because the rest is simply not water-soluble, for example. In other words, the end product that you buy as a convenience product then theoretically weighs 300 milligrams, so a third of a gram. But because the industrial production extracts differently, also with hot water, but because you work on a large scale, you have other dimensions. It results in different ratios. That means you basically have to standardize the industrial product to the product which is boiled at home. So, generate a conversion factor that you can achieve exactly that, what the domestic boiling, according to the traditional recipe, will result in regard to the composition of its ingredients. And that's what makes it so difficult. And compactates are now recognized as active ingredients, because they're the only product that reflects exactly this therapeutic drug extract ratio, which was compiled through long and complex series of tests and confirmed by many Chinese clinics. Now I understand, and that's why there's always relatively little in these bottles, because the great mass is gone. It's just the concentrate left. It's the active concentrate of all the ingredients, which are necessary for the effect. And those that are not necessary are gone. And with this tea, with these 10, 15 million active ingredients in there, I can make myself some tea. Well, the 15 million are in the plants. Yeah, so it's in there somewhere, right? No. Many are then no longer extracted. For example, the fatty compounds. Now, you also have to go a step further, of course. The reason why TCM had such a bad image in Europe was because precisely for these reasons of abuse. We had a slimming product in circulation in the Netherlands a few years ago, where wrong plants were also extracted wrongly. And then we had deaths, severe liver damage, severe kidney damage, and so on. I know this for weight loss. Exactly, and this is the problem. So that means the right plant and the right dosage, but only if they're extracted correctly. Was that the Puer tea? Now I have the name. No, it was a different name. But we have the problem that, for commercial reasons, organic solvents, basically something, I'll just say as an example, brush cleaner, etc., are used for extraction. So acetone is a brush cleaner that's used for extraction. The product is sold in Europe. In China, they would lock you up for it because you absolutely do not extract watery, but rather extract with substances which can be highly toxic to the body. That means the right plant, the right amount, the right extraction behavior. In other words, aqueous extraction. We have a few thousand years of experience in aqueous extraction, and profiteers use the non-critical data from the aqueous extract to make their humbug, their almost criminal extract. Solvents, come hell or high water. What we have already found is actually Let's leave this topic. Stomach churning. I'll put it this way. So there are solvents in it which we consider highly carcinogenic, which are used for extraction, because it's only sold to stupid long noses in Europe. Where do I have the security and guarantee that I have this effective tea, this active substance tea, where the ingredients are according to the highest DIN standards? Where can you still get it? So we have clear announcement: Compactates are only available in very few pharmacies that really have this product with this quality level. It's mainly distributed in the train station pharmacy in Kempten, which can deliver throughout Europe, and in the future for Switzerland in the Lion pharmacy in Zurich, which is supposed to cover the Swiss market. And that ensures that active ingredients are used and not something that someone once adulterated and then, because of commercial interests, only makes people sicker than they already are. Thank you very much, dear Hans. I believe that we've created a very, very important base in this episode that people out there also know if you buy a tea and you want to have a real effect, then you just have to pay attention to these things. And all of us who just drink a little tea for pleasure also know today that they're not necessarily an effect in every tea blend, but that there are really teas here which have a pharmaceutically proven effect, and are packaged in these compactates and are easy to make, and neither contain heavy metals, spraying agents, pesticides, and also microbiological contamination and mold toxins are not allowed in any way. These are the requirements of the future standards that have not yet been implemented in China either. But that's how it is in these compactates. It's already implemented. I can never be sure what I really have. But here I have it. There you have it. Here I can become a passionate tea drinker again because I know what I have and I have an effect. And you can be sure that there's nothing in it what is not beneficial for you. Thank you. I noticed that you can't stop talking. Dear Hans, sorry. All good, thank you very much for the clarification. I'm just happy to talk about TCM like that and really show this centuries-old knowledge and its incredible importance. But in the meantime, the image was simply damaged. Now the image is being rebuilt by such clear specifications of a DIN standard. And it makes me very happy that there will be products on the market soon with these DIN standards, but you can already have these compactates through pharmacies. I'm already testing it myself. I've already enjoyed this tea with no previous illness. So I also have another, the Shufeng Jedu, which has an incredible number of studies worldwide in the area of active ingredients. Even the WHO describes it. So here again, traditional Chinese medicine has an incredible effect. Isn't there something else with HIV? They also work with TCM? There should be effects there too, even though HIV is a completely different story because there is an interaction. It's considered between Western mindset, Western medicine and supportive. So in technical jargon, supportive phytomedicine. It's a bridge. We need both medicine relations. One will not work without the other. I always say one thing. Phytomedicine is ideal for chronic diseases, for illnesses where I don't have to intervene immediately but have a certain amount of time, so long stories. Few, we have just mentioned Shufeng Jedu, which is something that works acutely, quickly and efficiently. But most of them have more of a long-term effect. And Western medicine goes into the quick effect. And so we have two medical systems that could complement each other perfectly if we use them in combination. I'm running out of time, but the last question when I go to the website of this train station pharmacy, if I enter TCM, then there'll be an abundance of teas. I can probably read more about it there. Yeah, the information is there in detail. I can't tell you all of it here. I'll take a look because now I have two teas here at home. And I have to say, both are great, but I don't know what else is there. I'll familiarise myself with it. And all the best to you too. Thank you for watching and see you next time.